And we are live. Now, before I start this first episode of my podcast, I wanted to let you know that this has been in the making for about a year. What that really means is that I waited 11 months and 29 days to actually get started because of the resistance that I faced in showing up in this medium. Yes, I've talked about social anxiety in so many ways. I've been a guest on many podcasts. I've done my fair share of content creation around social anxiety. I have my website where I help clients with their social anxiety. But this is very new, and this is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time because I wanted to go more in depth with my thoughts, my experiences, my strategies, the things that have helped me, that have not helped me. And I put it off. Not necessarily because of social anxiety or imposter syndrome, but mainly because I wasn't sure my thoughts had any value in long form. It's easy to write a one-sentence quote or give a piece of advice. It's much harder to really research and dig into a particular topic or a new perspective with the hope that it will help someone. So I've been putting this off because it's really a different mountain to climb, and I wasn't sure I was up for the task. And I'm going to give you a disclaimer that throughout this podcast, with every episode, I hope to improve by 1%. That is my goal. I hope each podcast episode, I'm just a little bit better. And the reason why I say that is because I know it's coming. And this is part of the reason why I took so long to show up in this form. It's because I am not confident in the way that I speak. And you might find that crazy because I've gotten so many responses and comments on how confident I appear and how eloquent I am and how my thoughts are put together. But that couldn't be more further than the truth. I stutter, I stumble, I misuse words, I don't pronounce them properly sometimes. So that is kind of my disclaimer to you, to give me the permission and the grace and the kindness and the compassion to be with me as I am in this moment. Because I am an awkward person. I will be the first one to admit that I do awkward things. I'm clumsy. I say things at the wrong time. I do things that sometimes make no sense. I like to say that I have no life skills whatsoever, and my husband will attest to that. This is something that I will struggle with throughout this podcast, and I hope you're there alongside my struggle, because this is a huge step for me to feel like I am knowledgeable and confident enough to share my thoughts in a different way than writing it on paper, if that makes sense. I could write for days. Talking is a whole different beast that I haven't learned yet how to tame, okay? So before I begin the first episode, I really wanted to let you know that I will be vulnerable. I will share my stories, my experiences. I will have many guests come on this podcast and share their experiences, of course, with the whole core being social anxiety. And the interesting part is that there's so much to discuss around this topic. It is insane. If you were to look at my Notion board, I have 110 ideas for podcast episodes. So hopefully you guys stick around, enjoy what I have to say and what my guests have to say, because I really, really do think that you will benefit from many of these discussions. Now, I wanted to set the stage up for this podcast with the first episode being kind of a foundational one. And it's not going to be centered around what is social anxiety, okay? But before we talk about topics such as identity issues, grieving the people will never be, confidence ladders, and, naming a few topics like that, I want to talk about something that's recently come up in the scientific community as it pertains to social anxiety. Now, if you're listening to this, it might be because you have social anxiety. Maybe you know someone who does, and you want to help them. Or maybe you've seen me running around with a red devil wig on social media and you're like, does this girl have anything of substance to her? So maybe that's why you're here. You want to just check out and see, who am I at a deeper level? Either way, welcome. Now, at some point, I'll probably do a more in-depth episode on what social anxiety is, from my perspective as a, walking and breathing human being that has lived with social anxiety for over a decade, instead of the boring bullet points that you'll find on any post titled, "What is social anxiety?" Still, I wanted to start this podcast by discussing the 4 types of social anxiety. Why? Because it's multifaceted. So sometimes social anxiety will glare you in the face, and sometimes it will be inconspicuous, where you're like, I'm not socially anxious. What? So I want to make sure that you have the knowledge to identify which type of social anxiety you're running into at any given moment in time. And I think that once you have that knowledge and understanding, you really see yourself and everyone else around you differently, which is why I wanted to start the podcast with that. So before we get into the meat of it, because this is going to really go into some scientific terms, I'm going to base this podcast on a research paper. And I will let you know all that information once we get to that point. But you might experience all 4 types of social anxiety, or maybe just one. So I'll step into the shoes of a fortune teller for a second and tell you that no matter which type you've experienced or you're experiencing now, it will change. How's that for a prediction? The truth is that social anxiety is like an unstable teenager taking over the reins. It's irrational, demanding, attention-seeking, and above all else, excruciatingly annoying. You never know when it will explode in your face and how it will make you look. Now, like a teenager, social anxiety is multifaceted. While it might feel like it's pure chaos, ultimately, it boils down to 1 or 2 reasons why it's acting the way it does. For example, you might feel social anxiety while conversing with a close friend and just having a regular chit chat. And out of nowhere, it's going to hit you that you just can't look at them in the eyes. That's definitely happened to me, especially post-pandemic. I really had a hard time making eye contact with really close friends of mine, and I couldn't shake it off. But maybe you have no problem asking a total stranger for sunscreen because you're silly Willy that goes to the beach without it. How does that make sense, right? So social anxiety, it's not chaotic. There's a different reason for acting one way versus the other. Now, don't worry, we will make sense of it all in just a little bit. But I also wanted to add another layer on top of this knowledge, that as we move through the different stages of life, we're going to rotate between the 4 types of social anxiety. So something that was once easy for us to achieve is now a mountain to climb. Eating out alone, asking for directions, showing up at a networking event, texting a friend, whatever the case may be. If you're struggling with something 10 years ago and you've overcome it, you might struggle in a different area. So that's why I say that you will be rotating between the types of social anxiety. Now, like a teenager, because I'm going to use that analogy, I think it really makes sense in terms of the 4 types of social anxiety. It springs upon us unexpectedly. It's having us search for the previous younger version that we've become comfortable with. It's like, where's the kid that I once knew? Because once you become acclimated to yourself as the version that you are, it's hard to move away from that because you're out of your comfort zone. You're not sure how to react anymore. And you're like, well, I just want to go back to how it was. But unfortunately, that's just not how things go. So I think that this is going to really revolutionize how you think about your social anxiety. Listen to this very closely. And this is based on the research paper by David Moskovich, the author of What is the Core Fear in Social Phobia? A new model to facilitate individualized case conceptualization and treatment. That's a mouthful. So I'm going to give you the link for this research paper that I base this episode on so you can get all the juicy details and the tables and the statistics and all that wonderful stuff from there. But The way that we have been thinking about social anxiety has shifted, okay? And this is what really blew my mind. So it's not so much the situation that creates your social anxiety, but what you think will happen while you're, socializing. Do you notice that distinction there? It is not the situation at hand that's causing your social anxiety. It's what you think the outcome of it will be. So in her book, How to Be Yourself, if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. It is the cornerstone, the foundational book for handling social anxiety. The author, Ellen Hendrickson, talks about the big reveal, namely that your social anxiety protects you so that no one finds out about your dirty secret. So throughout this podcast, I'm going to use these words interchangeably. So the big reveal, the fatal flaw, and the dirty secret. Okay, I kind of like the dirty secret, so I'm going to use that. But whatever helps you understand it better, you can use those words. So we are afraid that people will find out our dirty secret. You just worry that that's what's going to happen. So I'm going to let you in on my dirty secret, okay? Because this is the one that I've been trying to hold close to my heart and the reason why my social anxiety really intensified throughout the years. And it's this: I am not the intellectual I see myself as being. And that really hurts because even now, as I'm doing this episode, I feel that in my bones, right? And it's exactly what my disclaimer was about, because I feel like I get tongue-tied, I forget words, I may misuse them because I'm trilingual, and I feel like I just go through life by sheer luck. So in scientific terms, my dirty secret would be labeled as the inability to convey a desired social impression. Whew, that is heavy. So for more than a decade, I literally walked around believing that I was boring, that I had nothing to say, that I was incompetent due to my awkwardness. Since that wasn't the impression I wanted to make, I overcompensated and I let social anxiety guide me. Now, David Moskovich, in his paper, he states that there are 4 dimensions of social anxiety, and they all boil down to these 4 criteria. Okay, so there's the feared stimulus. So this is your dirty secret, the big reveal, the fatal flaw that you're trying to hide. So for example, you might find yourself shaking while conducting a presentation. So another way of looking at it is that a feared stimulus is the thing that triggers your social anxiety. Very important to really understand what this is. This is the only way you can move forward. What is your feared stimulus, your dirty secret? What is it? Next, you need to come to an understanding of what is the feared consequence to this stimulus. So feared consequence is associated with the stimulus. So this is the catastrophe that's waiting for you should the dirty secret be revealed. So for example, everyone will notice that you're shaking. Thus, you shouldn't be up there presenting. The third criteria to be aware of are the fear triggers and contexts. These are the threatening social situations you're going to find yourself in. So for example, being interviewed in a panel or being asked to present in a meeting what you've been working on. Those are the situations that are going to trigger your stimulus, that might reveal your big, reveal your dirty secret. And then the feared consequences are going to hit you. And the last criteria that we need to understand is fear-related avoidance and safety behaviors. So how do you act in the face of the stimulus and the consequences that you are so scared are going to happen? So for example, your safety behavior in a presentation might be to put your hands in your pockets because you're so worried that you're shaking and you don't want people to see that you're shaking because they might think that you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're talking about, so you're just going to hide them. So all of these 4 boxes need to be evaluated. We're going to dissect this a little bit more, so this is going to be a little bit more in depth now. But first, just raise your hands, like quietly, wherever you are, in the car, at home, at work. If all this time you've been doing your best to avoid being negatively evaluated, rejected, embarrassed, scared to lose social status, without really considering the root cause of why these outcomes might happen. I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about that. Now, you might think that being negatively judged or rejected are your feared stimuli, that's your feared stimulus, the dirty secret. But in truth, these things are your feared consequences, because these are the things that you think will happen once people find out your dirty secret. This tells us that it's not the situation or the stimulus that makes you feel social anxiety. It's what you think the consequence, the outcome of the situation will be, that's getting to you. Let's just clarify what this all means in human terms. Suppose that you believe that you fall short of other people's expectations of you, and you feel inadequate, awkward, stupid. These are what we call the feared stimuli. Now, in that case, you'll do anything to avoid running into situations. These are the fear-related avoidance situations that might expose you. This is why you might not have a problem asking for sunscreen, but you don't feel comfortable being vulnerable to a friend. That is why social anxiety doesn't show up the same way in all situations or contexts, because your dirty secret is aligned in one direction. It's not all over the place. Now, you might have all 4 types, which I'm going to dig into in just a second as to what they are. But ultimately, there's maybe 1 or 2 things that you are really, really hiding from the world. Because what happens when you're exposed? People will negatively judge you. You might be embarrassed. These are the feared consequences. That's what you fear. Now we're getting to the core of it. In his research, David concludes that everyone with social anxiety can be placed into these 4 boxes based on the feared stimulus, okay? Now, this is what has come to be known as the 4 types of social anxiety. So no matter who you are, your background, your experiences, you'll find a type to relate to. And chances are that you'll relate to more than one. Woohoo! Winning the lottery here, because these are all interconnected. Each type of social anxiety is the dirty secret, fatal flaw, big reveal you're trying to hide. Now, remember that each type centers around a deficiency you think you have compared to your friends or society, other expectations that people might have of you. It feels like there's something lacking and everyone else has it. Okay, so here's number 1. And this is the first type of social anxiety. Skills-driven. Perceived flaws in social skills and behaviors. What the heck does that mean? Now, this type of social anxiety is when you feel that your social skills are not up to par. The world crashes every time you stutter, forget your name, or get emotional, making you feel awkward and misunderstood. You feel like the awkward one who has not figured out how to do life, while everyone else is cruising by, high-fiving each other along the way. Sorry, no high fives for you. You're worried that you don't know how to properly carry a conversation as a mature adult, or that you missed a memo on how to not overshare, yet still be vulnerable enough to build a genuine connection. Now, here are some of the dirty secrets associated with this type of social anxiety. You have nothing to say. You'll do or say something stupid. You'll offend someone, act inappropriately in the situation at hand. This hits very, very close to my heart. If this sounds like you, try to drill down into what makes you think you suck at your social skills and why that would be the case. Many studies show that just because you feel anxious or awkward doesn't mean that that's how others perceive you. Gotta love those cognitive distortions. Now, the second type of social anxiety is called symptoms-driven. Perceived flaws in concealing potentially visible signs of anxiety. Now, this type of social anxiety is attributed to your physical symptoms, the ones that you're feeling while experiencing the stimuli. The idea that you have anxiety over your anxiety, and I'm sure many of us have had that reaction where you're panicking and you're like, oh my gosh, shit, I can't believe I'm panicking about this. And you panic even more. So if you're in a social situation and you start sweating, you'll be anxious about the sweat or the blushing or the shakes. You'll think that everyone can see your struggle and judge you for it negatively. If you see someone attractive a few feet away and become anxious about them, noticing that you notice them, you might blush or shake. You'll further zone in on that physical symptom, making it worse. The truth is that these physiological symptoms we're experiencing lie solely within our bodies and are not visible externally. We think people can see how high our heartbeat is or the sweat between our boobs. Now, here's the dirty secret associated with this type of social anxiety, that you're not able to control or hide the anxiety you have, which will be revealed as truth via blushing or sweating, for example. If this sounds like you, remember that most people are too consumed with their anxieties and thoughts to pay close attention to your physical changes. They might be so subtle and gradual, making it impossible for someone to notice. And if you're focusing too much on the symptoms themselves, try to avert your thoughts towards something or someone else. Now we're going to go to type number 3, which is appearance driven. Perceived flaws in physical appearance. So this type of social anxiety is in line with body image issues, right? So it's along the spectrum of body dysmorphia. You are worried that everyone can see your most personal flaws. So maybe you have a crooked nose, asymmetrical face, disproportionate weight, messy hair, and so on. And they will judge you behind your back. So you probably have a more negative view of your appearance than anyone else around you. And that makes sense because it becomes the focus of your attention, which lends you to believe that that's what everyone else is focusing on, right? We have this urge to put the spotlight on us, and we think and feel like everyone else is putting the spotlight on us also. But we need to remember that everyone is shining their own spotlight on themselves, and they really, really don't care that much about us. Now, the underlying dirty secret here is that whatever flaw you have is a reflection on you. So depending on the flaw, you believe people will think you're lazy, unorganized, indifferent, or without shame. These flaws in physical appearance become associated with some underlying meaning you give, making it hard to think otherwise about them. Now, if this sounds like you, try your best to overwrite the thoughts you have about your flaw, because the more you try to conceal it, the more attention you're bringing to it. So try to disconnect by reminding yourself that everyone has something they wish they could change about themselves and that it's normal. The fourth and last type of social anxiety is character-driven, the perceived personality-related flaws. And this is probably the one that I resonate the most with. And this type of social anxiety is when you feel like your entire personality sucks. It's not a fun one to have. And everyone thinks the same thing. And, maybe that's why you have a hard time making friends. I know that that's how I felt for so long. That you're boring, stupid, not cool, not funny. You think you're probably incompetent at your job. And even if someone were to ask about it, you wouldn't even know what to say. So this is a very sneaky type of social anxiety that you must watch out for because it can seep into your bones and make you believe what you think. No one, and I mean no one, is witty, funny, confident, and so on all the time. Chances are that the people you meet are just normal, ordinary. So it's hard to wrap our minds around that because sometimes we compare ourselves to the ideal that we see in the outside world, maybe some influencers that we see, some actors, comedians. Most of the world is not like that. And even in person, you're not always on. So this idea that you always have to prove yourself is at the core of this type of social anxiety. Because here's a dirty secret associated with this one, that you're boring, stupid, not cool, or not funny. And people will realize that. And that hurts, doesn't it? So again, if this sounds like you, remember you're not a comedian. Your job isn't to create stories and jokes to keep people entertained. Your presence, kind words, and thoughtful questions are enough for people to value you and want to be around you. Now, to truly understand everything that I just talked about and the power of this knowledge, think of it this way. Once you know what your dirty secret, your big reveal, or fatal flaw is, you can pinpoint the situations where you're more likely to be exposed. Now I'm going to, again, you can find this in the link in the show notes in the episode, there's a table in there in the paper that has each criteria labeled, each type, and then the stimulus, the triggers, the context, the safety behaviors associated with each one. So for example, if your big, reveal, your feared stimulus is a perceived flaw in your physical appearance. So your social anxiety is appearance driven. Then your automatic thoughts will be, people will notice that I'm dressed inappropriately, that I'm ugly, that I'm fat. And some of the threatening social situations for this type of social anxiety is any activity in which physical attributes are the focus of attention. So for example, if you're walking in a crowded street, driving in heavy traffic, going to a party, your appearance is going to matter more to you in these situations. And then the possible safety behaviors would be that you're concealing the problem areas. You're covering up yourself with makeup, with different clothings. Another example, so this one was very pertinent to me. If you think you're boring, you'll probably try to avoid situations where you have to give information about yourself. Dating, scene, happy hours, one-on-one conversations, icebreakers, holy moly, icebreakers. So, to avoid being exposed, you'll avoid situations like these altogether. Or you use coping mechanisms such as asking a lot of questions, censoring your thoughts, or over-rehearsing what you will say before speaking. And I'm an expert at that. I have entire conversations scripted for days before I meet someone, just in the off chance that we have nothing to say or that I'm going to come off as boring, whatever it is, that my dirty secret is at that moment in time. I'm going to prepare for it. So that's a lot of information and knowledge that I like to think you did not have before listening to the podcast. And I think that this is golden. And this is the reason why I really wanted to start with this topic for the podcast, is because once you have an understanding of the foundation of the type of social anxiety you experience and the type of situations you're trying to avoid, you know what to work on and what to work with. And then you can finally seek help to really improve your life and your well-being instead of relying on safety behaviors. So I hope that you can think a little bit more about your social anxiety and how you experience it. And I would love to hear which type or types of social anxiety you have. I have two. So the character-driven one, very, very near and dear to my heart, and the skills-driven one. At some point in time, I experience-driven when I was younger, but I've never had the symptoms-driven. I do sweat, but it's never visible, and so it never was a thing for me. But I'm curious which type you've experienced or maybe are experiencing now. And if you've enjoyed this episode, because I am really excited to hear your feedback so that I can move on and improve by 1% each episode. And that really boils down to the response that I get. So please feel free to reach out and let me know, as well as the type of social anxiety that you have. And hopefully I'll see you, quote unquote, next week. Bye.